Okay, Sam's Bulldog here. Going to take another look at the content of the speech of Professor Jordan Peterson. My strategy tonight was to go to YouTube, put in Jordan Peterson Science, and then sort it by number of views. And what you see is Jordan Peterson Beast Mode, Peterson Genius, and then a 2.5-hour interview that I've already discussed and we'll discuss further. Then 42 minutes of Joe Rogan, and then conversation between JP and Sam Harris, the full one of the podcasts. And then we get to You're Wrong About Morality. Roasts Sam Harris. Dr. Jordan Peterson was raised a Christian, blah, blah, blah. So I haven't seen this video. If he talks about Sam Harris, I'm going to say that everything he says that is at least a claim that can be falsified will be false. He will ask leading questions that call into question Sam Harris's view. He'll accuse Sam Harris of not knowing this and not talking about that. I mean, just analyze what he said. You'll see. I mean, his followers, about the 10th one, and this, I mean, maybe it's not the 10th, maybe it's only the 6th one out of 30 or 50, accuses me of straw manning. None of them have yet to demonstrate they know what that means, because by accusing me of it, they're demonstrating they don't know what it is. If I'm straw manning, first of all, I'm never straw manning. If I'm making a mistake interpreting what Peterson is saying, well then, it's going to sound like straw manning. If I don't get what he's saying and I riff on that with facts, especially based on the public views of other intellectuals and commonly held beliefs about biology, okay, I could get stuff wrong and it'll sound like I'm putting words in his mouth and so on. I am not trying to put words in his mouth. I am trying to understand what he's saying. I am trying to find where he gets to his thesis. I'm told his thesis is this: he wants to help change the world with don't throw the baby out with the bathwater with myths and so on. He's particularly enamored of the Jewish Bible and what came after recently. And, why not Scientology or Mormonism or Zoroastrianism or Judaism or those other, to quote Sam Harris, those other thousands of dead gods who lie in that mass grave we call mythology. Mythology is amazing, as I've said before. I didn't get into it until late in life because it didn't appeal to me, because it wasn't quote-unquote real. It's great literature. Certainly the Greek stuff is. Homer is, if you're in the mood, Homer is like no other. Especially when you go to Turkey and Greece and you read a lot about what took place back then. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, let's get back to this guy. So, and another thing I want to make clear is, I'll say positive things when I hear positive things. I've asked everybody who's responded to me in defense of Peterson, saying, well, just provide me, and a friend has, and there's a lot of stuff. But as I've said, I've listened to a dozen hours of this guy talk, plus a couple of, dozen hours researching him and doing things on my own with others that presumably fill the same academic space as he does. believe me, that tells you a lot. But frankly, you can just not even go down this road. If you've read good writing in your life, you understand how science and broadly ideas of any kind are thrown up. Philosophers do it, and they use a lot of words, and they bore the tears out of people, some of them, and they're hard to follow and so on. But if you stick with it, you can get somewhere. And then you read critiques of these complex ideas from a mile up, and somebody who really understands it explains where Plato is going, or Socrates, or Carl Jung. Okay, whatever, doesn't matter. That's one of the biggest problems with this guy. What his followers don't seem to understand is you should be able to YouTube any video of anybody talking about anything they know anything about. I don't care if it's furniture building, or quantum mechanics, or star formation and black holes and the singularity, or cancer, which has these long words when they describe it all, impossible to pronounce. The point is, if the content isn't so specialized that it is for a very narrow audience, in other words, if you've ever looked at a medical book, you can't, it takes 10 minutes to read one paragraph and it doesn't make any sense because you have to know so many words. It's incredible the economy of words they use in those texts and how imperceptible it all is to an outsider. This is personal experience. All I'm saying is there's always there. I mentioned to a friend who's a JP fan that I got a guy who left. It's right here. Guy left his smartphone on a chair at Starbucks. It's 11:14.
Man, cheers, man. I'm sorry.
No problem. No, dude.
Thank you, bro.
It's my good deed for the day. Yeah. Get home safe, man. Anytime. So he left his phone. It started ringing, and there's no one else here. So I picked it up, and he just picked up his phone. Anyway, where was I? The point is, when you talk to when you follow intellectuals, and I don't like to use big words. When you follow people talking about things they know about, okay, and this includes Martin Luther King and Einstein, they are great to listen to. Okay, they offer something. They're there. Okay, they enrich the world in their own way, like every human being hopefully is capable of doing as they live their lives. I haven't found anything redeeming about this guy. And there's lots of professors, presumably, who don't have much to say about anything in this world, just like mailmen who may not have anything to say in this world. And that's no sin, I guess. But to use the word sin again, to me, intellectual dishonesty at a university where a guy is claiming to be a scientist, and again, scientists are wrong 7 times a day, and if they're not good at cleaning up their messes, they're bad scientists. There's lots of bad scientists. I don't understand why people are so confused about this. Obviously, Jordan Peterson is a smart man. If you think I've suggested otherwise, you've got me wrong. He's confused, minimum. I don't think he's confused. It's tough to gauge motives. I talk about this a lot on my Sam's Bulldog page. There's always there. I'm going to move on. I've made my point. I have nothing personal against this man. What I have against him are the ideas that he's throwing out to university students, and I'm trying to find out who listens to him, and I'm not the FBI. I'm just curious, because I think I have a very good idea who thinks this guy has something to offer. And it isn't informed science fans, I can tell you that. They might self-identify as that, but they're not. And what I think, anyway, I'm speculating. Let's get back. Let's listen to Jordan Peterson supposedly tell Sam Harris, the guy who's been studying moral philosophy since 1980, well, we'll just say 87, and has actually, forget about degrees, he's, read his bio. But again, who gives a shit? It's the ideas that matter. So let's go. It's like 8.5 minutes or something. It's not even long.
When you're black, it's almost like having a gun pointed at your face.
Apologies for this.
Get that gun off me.
It's the reality.
Is there something, this is the main question, is there a set of ideas that Western civilization is predicated on that are more than just bloody opinion? That's the question.
Of course.
Because if there isn't, well then, what do you do about that? It's arbitrary? You're just holding it for no reason whatsoever? It could be a different system. There's no reason to stick with it. All of those things. Like it takes the core out of it. Well, that was Nietzsche's claim, right? He said, you take the core metaphysical presupposition out from underneath Western civilization, or any civilization for that matter, and the whole thing loosens, shakes, and crumbles. Well, for Nietzsche, the metaphysical
Who cares? How many times are you going to mention Nietzsche? We all know who he is. We all understand his nihilistic early 20th century German philosophy if we want to. Okay? Let's start with this. Who gives a shit about Nietzsche? Okay? He's dead. And we can read his philosophy and move on. Okay? So, I don't care what Nietzsche said about the underlying structure of Christianity. If it falls, it'll create chaos. Good! I don't want prelates and hysterical virgins running the world based on myths and legends about a flying Jewish carpenter. Does that make sense? I apologize for starting with the snark.
presupposition was God. Well, and then the question, of course, well, what even does that mean? And on one hand, it means, I suppose, adherence to a dogmatic set of beliefs, but then you might ask yourself, well, is there something else that it means? It means at least the hypothesis of some transcendent value. It means at least that.
Yeah, hypothesis of a transcendent value, which means nothing because it's a hypothesis of a transcendent value.
Nietzsche announced the death of God, and so one of the consequences of that, Dostoevsky was working on exactly the same set of ideas, and
here we go.
in Crime and Punishment in particular, which is a book.
Okay, before I talk, I want to make clear about something. Okay, I took one philosophy class over 30 years ago, which was an intro, which I did enjoy, and was eye-opening. Okay, and I've read the newspaper since. Okay. No expert about anything. I've read about Nietzsche. I had a friend who was a fan 25 years ago when we used to talk about Camus and Sartre. And around the time I went to Paris the first time, so let's say 94. Read a lot of Hemingway and Fitzgerald too. Blah, blah, blah. The point is, I don't know the first thing about Nietzsche, and I know a little bit. Okay? Go ahead, talk about a philosopher, talk about what he was right or wrong about for today, get your thesis out, okay? But now he's talking about Dostoevsky. He's bringing up another Russian, amazing, post-U.S. Civil War era intellectual, okay, our Civil War. So think around the time of the Civil War in Russia, in our Civil War, Russia was writing a lot from there to, let's say, the First World War, right, 1916. Russia went through massive change across the board. I know this is obvious to point out, but at least in the narrow sense of the literature that this guy talks about, like, he's found gold or something. I mean, it is gold, but there's lots of books, and there's lots of Russian authors. There's lots of opinions out there, and again, I'm denigrating the fact that every speech is the same, and he talks about, hey, Nietzsche said that if Christianity goes, it'll really get fucked up around here. Okay. Well, okay. Now, next. Oh, and Dostoevsky? Crime and Punishment, dude. This young guy felt like he was entitled to kill an old lady with an axe, because screw her, he was more important in whatever way he justified in his mind. It's an amazing book. The translation matters big time for people out there who speak Russian and read Russian. I can't get close. I read it 25 or long time ago. I read The Idiot. I read Crime and Punishment. I read a little short stuff, but I never read the Brothers Karamazov. It's too much of a commitment. I don't like it enough. I mean, it's brooding stuff, and the names are difficult, but it's the real deal. I mean, you understand why Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and Nietzsche, who wrote a lot, right? Thus spake Zarathustra, where he announced God is dead, which I'm not going to riff on, because I don't really know, but what he means is modern man with their machines and their killing and have moved away from the fear of God, and so on. And what are those implications? God became the concern of what God thought of us. Seemingly became less relevant. I don't want to talk about it anymore because I don't know it. The point is, I don't need to know it, and I shouldn't need to know it. If he's going to bring up Nietzsche, summarize his views, say he got it wrong, say he got it right, but summarize Nietzsche, summarize Dostoevsky, and then move on. Okay? I know the dream of the suffering horse, whatever. Great. What's that got to do with our modern world, okay, except as a cautionary tale, if that's the way you want to take it, okay? That's it. There's lots of ideas out there.
It's a necessary book. That's the thing. There's a number of books that were written in the last 120 years that you really have to read, and Crime and Punishment is one of them, and I think the Gulag Archipelago is another, and probably Beyond Good and Evil is another. But, Dostoevsky and Nietzsche were writing in parallel. It's remarkable how much their lives intertwined, and Nietzsche knew more about Dostoevsky than is generally known. There's been some recent scholarship indicating that, but in Dostoevsky's book, Crime and Punishment, he has his main character, Raskolnikov, decides that he's going to commit a murder, and he has very good justification for the murder, and Dostoevsky's very good at this. He puts his characters into very, very difficult moral situations and gives them full justification for pursuing the
denouement.
Pursuing the pathway that they're pursuing. And so Raskolnikov, he's broke and starving. He wants to go to law school. His sister's about to prostitute herself, roughly speaking, by marrying.
This is good. This is good. All right? I want to hear this. I want to hear a good summary of Crime and Punishment again, because it's a fucking great book. Full stop.
A guy that hates her, that she hates, and he has contempt for her, or at least acts in that manner. He's trying to rescue his mother as well, who's also in dire financial straits. He goes to a pawnbroker to pawn his meager possessions so that he can continue to scrape by, and she has this niece, I believe it's her niece, that's not very bright, who she basically treats as a slave and is horrible to. And so the pawnbroker has this money. Raskolnikov is in dire need. He thinks, look, I'll just kill her, because why the hell not? I'll take her money. She's not doing any good with it anyways. I'll free her niece, who's just lurking as a slave. She's got all these other people tangled up in her pawnbroker schemes. All that'll happen is the world will be a better place. And the only thing that's holding me back is conventional moral cowardice.
Mm-hmm.
And, Dostoevsky has his character in Crime and Punishment go through days, hours and days and weeks of intense imagination about this, rationalization about this.
This is excellent. All right, this is what he should be doing. Okay, this is what he should be doing. Why isn't he do this all the time?
Trying to justify himself, placing himself outside the law so that he can perpetrate this act, and telling himself with all the best nihilistic arguments that the only possible thing that could be holding him back is an arbitrary sense of indoctrinated morality. Mm-hmm. And so Dostoevsky explores that. He does commit the murder, and then, of course, all hell breaks loose because things don't necessarily turn out the way that you want. He gets away with it, however. Well, he gets away with it technically because no one knows he did it. But he doesn't get away with it in relationship to his own conscience. And so the rest of the book explores that. Well, Dostoevsky, I believe it was in Crime and Punishment, although he makes the same point in many of his books, he makes a very fundamental point, and this is the kind of point that I think that people who haven't investigated these matters down this particular literary and philosophical pathway never grapple with.
All right, good. All right, I'm fully prepared to compliment him and post this. Okay, he just laid groundwork about the nihilism of authors and philosophers in Russia before 1916 and maybe after 1916 and after the 1860s, let's say. Pardon me. And he says that the broader points that the author/philosopher are making is ignored today. And that rabbit hole should be crawled down. Making perfect sense to me. Interesting, definitely.
Dostoevsky said straightforwardly, if there's no God, so if there's no higher value, let's say, if there's no transcendent value, then you can do whatever you want.
Yep.
And that's the question that he's investigating. And you see, this is why I have such frustration, say, with people like Sam Harris, the sort of radical atheists, because they seem to think that...
Okay. Radical atheists. There's no such thing. I mean, people have to really understand that radical, what do you mean? Loquacious? Talkative? Writes too many books? Has too many podcast appearances? He's just as much an atheist as anybody else who claims he's an atheist, which is simply the rejection of anything that doesn't have evidence. Okay, for the last time. Leprechauns and God are the same thing to me. Why wouldn't they be? There is no evidence for either. So in my mind, I'll sit back until the evidence comes in. That's all it is. I'm not persuaded by Islam or Hinduism or reincarnation or astrology or palm reading or Christian writings, of which I've read. I've also read the Attica stuff. I've read the history of all of that. I mean, there's nothing... the rejection of absurdity, which equals no evidence in my mind, is not a radical position. Everybody does it every day. I mean, so you can't... That alone says volumes. So let's see what he says.
Once human beings abandon their grounding in the transcendent, that the the plausible way forward is with a kind of purist rationality that automatically attributes to other people equivalent value. It's like, I just don't understand that. They believe that that's the
Now, I'll disclose when this was taped. I'm not sure when it was. But Sam Harris, from his earliest writings, so unless this is before he knew Sam Harris personally before he published his first book or something, all Sam Harris does is talk about the transcendent and how vital it is, to his life and so many others. This is a guy who never even considered himself an atheist, was just interested in the whole project of belief and brain states and philosophy and knowledge and irrational belief and outcomes of purely irrational belief that we all hold in one form or another. I mean, this guy opened every goddamn book with, oh yeah, I hung out in a cave by myself for a month in my 20s, and by the way, I tried some killer drugs when I was in Nepal and India, and I had a long conversation with a guy in an airport who had a gun on his hip, and thankfully I'm not the type to go anywhere with drugs except to take them where I was. So we had an honest conversation with security at an airport when he was leaving. I'm going off topic here because, I'm going deep here. It's not off topic. He is making a claim that Sam Harris doesn't value the transcendent when Sam Harris has written in every one of his books, and in one book in particular, which he talked about writing, and now is presumably soon to release, which is in beta now, a meditation app. Okay, he wants to spread meditation because you don't need to believe a goddamn thing to get benefits about meditation. And he wrote a book about it, and he has content out there that you have to pay for because he carries you along in meditation and so on. What am I trying to say? He hosts it. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. So Sam Harris is a scientist who got to be a scientist because he was fascinated with brain states, the transcendency, the feeling a person gets in church, the feeling a person gets at the mosque, the feeling a person gets at a sunrise or at witnessing the birth of their child, or for that matter, taking LSD or mushrooms. Now, he's been very clear, and here's what he said. If we can get these brain states safely, that's a really good thing, without doing drugs, without doing crazy stuff. Apparently, this is what people who can meditate can do. And the ones that are really good have this incredibly satisfactory feeling, I don't know how to phrase it, all the time. Like they're buzzed, but they're not buzzed. They're just in a good place. I've never been there. This is what I've listened to. So, this is slander. Unless it is so early in Sam's career, which again is still not an excuse because his first book talks about it, which he started writing the day after September 11th, about the enormous cost of belief without evidence, as demonstrated by buildings falling that I saw live and ran home from when I lived on East 63rd. And he talked at length. I mean, I could quote what he said on the book tour and in the book. Okay, that happened, and you have every politician and every douchebag on saying Islam is a beautiful religion of peace, and these people are corrupting it. Well, that isn't true. Okay, so, I wish it was true. And then they went into their own God talk about God looks out for us and America and all this stuff, playing their own word games with their make-believe. And he described it as, this is, we're playing both sides of the board of a dangerous game. In other words, they got their God speak, we got ours. How the fuck are we ever going to progress until we talk about secular ideas, and here's another. He has said in at least one context publicly, Sam Harris, that Jesus was a moral genius, the Buddha certainly, and that if these people were as they are portrayed in their literature, again, he doesn't believe in anything otherworldly, of course, but if Jesus was the amazing moral teacher that we think he is, we need to find out how he did it. And we need to spread that. Okay? But we're going to find out how he did it, if we ever do, through science and reason and research and trying to understand, not praying over it. Okay? I mean, this is so obvious, it's insulting to have to say. So, he's got him totally wrong. Sam Harris is famous precisely because he's a drug-taking neuroscientist who used to be a bodyguard for the Dalai fucking Lama, okay, for a very brief period of time, and was enamored of those ideas. And he changed, he learned, he grew, and he hasn't come close to abandoning the most precious experiences that people have of transcendent love or out-of-body experience, or this wave that comes over you that's described, which I have not experienced, but I presume is real. Why wouldn't it be? So that's disgraceful. Sorry.